El Chapo, the drug lord who escaped twice. He wasn't the biggest drug lord, he wasn't the loudest. But he was the slipperiest, the most cunning, and arguably the most dangerous narco king the world had ever seen. They called him El Chapo Shorty. At just 5 feet 6 inches tall, you might pass him on the street without a second glance. But this unremarkable-looking man built an empire that towered over governments, corrupted entire institutions, and turned the drug trade into a multinational corporation of death. He transformed the Sinaloa Cartel into a machine that moved billions of dollars and hundreds of tons of narcotics. He escaped from maximum security prisons not once, but twice, humiliating to governments and becoming a legend in the process. But who really was El Chapo? How did a barefoot kid from the poverty-stricken mountains of Mexico become the face of modern narco-violence? How did he outsmart the DE, the FBI, and 2 entire governments? This isn't just a story about drugs. It's about tunnels that stretched for miles, terror that silenced entire cities, and total control that reached into the highest levels of government. Let's rewind to where this nightmare began. Archivaldo Lara was born in 1957 in La Tuna, Sinaloa, a village so remote it might as well have been on another planet. This wasn't just rural Mexico, this was the forgotten Mexico. No running water flowed through rusted pipes. No schools taught children to read. Just endless hills covered in dust, desperation, and something else, opium poppies. His family had been growing poppies and marijuana long before the drug war had a name, long before it became a billion-dollar industry. It was simply survival. Chapo's father was a violent alcoholic who beat his son regularly, teaching him early that violence was just another tool for getting what you wanted. By age Sherwoo, Young had already dropped out of school, not that there was much of one to drop out of. He was working the drug fields full-time, his hands stained with the sap of plants that would eventually kill thousands of people across 2 nations. But even then, something set him apart from the other kids scraping by in the mountains. While others dreamed of escaping to the cities, was studying the geography of smuggling. He memorized every trail, every cave, every corrupt official who could be bought. He was learning the ancient art of moving contraband through a landscape that had been hiding secrets for centuries. He started as a mula-human pack animal carrying drugs across treacherous terrain. But Chapo wasn't just moving product. He was learning logistics. How do you move anything, anywhere, through a labyrinth of corruption, military checkpoints, and hostile terrain? These lessons would serve him well, and he was already showing signs of the ruthlessness that would define his empire. When his boss failed to pay him for a dangerous run, 22-year-old Chapo didn't complain or quit. He organized an ambush, killed his boss, and took over the entire smuggling route. No warning, no negotiation, no mercy, just bullets and business. By the 1980s, everything was about to change. The Colombian cartels, flush with cocaine money, were looking for partners in Mexico. The Americans were cracking down on Caribbean routes, forcing traffickers to find new paths north. And the man rising from the dirt tracks of Sinaloa was perfectly positioned to meet this demand. In the 1980s, El Chapo aligned himself with Miguel Ángel Gallardo, known as El Padrino, the godfather of Mexican drug trafficking. Gallardo ran the Guadalajara cartel, Mexico's first truly organized drug empire, and he became Chapo's mentor in the dark arts of narco business. Under Gallardo's tutelage, Chapo learned that successful drug trafficking wasn't just about violence. Though violence was certainly part of it. It was about logistics, corruption, and building networks that could move product faster and more efficiently than anyone else. Chapo quickly earned a reputation for two things: moving product faster than anyone else in the organization, and solving problems with bullets when diplomacy failed. He was quiet, deadly efficient, and absolutely ruthless when crossed. But Chapo had bigger ambitions than being someone else's lieutenant. He wanted his own organization, his own smuggling routes, his own criminal legacy. When Gallardo was arrested in 1989, the massive Guadalajara cartel splintered like glass, and Chapo grabbed the biggest shard. This became the foundation of the Sinaloa Cartel. His strategy was as brutal as it was brilliant. First, he created a spider web of tunnels underneath the US-Mexico border, not crude holes in the ground, but sophisticated passages with ventilation systems, lighting, and even rail systems for moving massive quantities of drugs. Second, he systematically corrupted every level of law enforcement and government. Customs agents, military officials, police commanders, judges, politicians, everyone had a price, and Chapo was willing to pay it. Those who couldn't be bought were eliminated. His smuggling methods became legendary in their creativity. He used trains, submarines, refrigerated trucks carrying legitimate produce, and even primitive drones. If there was a way to move something across the border, Chapo's organization would find it and exploit it. By the 2000s, the numbers were staggering. The Sinaloa Cartel was moving an estimated 500 tons of drugs annually. The money flowing back was equally mind-boggling: billions of dollars that needed to be laundered, invested, and used to expand the empire. This wasn't just drug money. This was build your own government money. Chapo wasn't just bribing individual officials, he was purchasing entire institutions, creating a parallel power structure that operated alongside, and often above, the legitimate government of Mexico. With power came inevitable war. Chapo's rise threatened established criminal organizations across Mexico. The Tijuana cartel, controlled by the violent Arellano brothers, viewed him as an upstart who needed to be eliminated. The Juarez cartel saw his expansion as an invasion of their territory. Later, newer organizations like Los Zetas and the Leyva organization would emerge as equally dangerous rivals. These weren't traditional turf wars with occasional violence. These were full-scale massacres that turned entire regions of Mexico into war zones. Entire police departments were assassinated in coordinated attacks. Public officials were decapitated, their heads left in coolers with notes signed Sinaloa. Bodies were hung from highway overpasses as warnings to rivals and authorities alike. The violence didn't stay contained to the criminal underworld. Innocent people caught in the crossfire, journalists who reported on cartel activities, business owners who refused to pay extortion, ordinary citizens who witnessed the wrong thing at the wrong time, all became casualties in Chapo's war for supremacy. But Chapo understood that brutality alone wouldn't guarantee long-term success. He played a sophisticated public relations game, positioning himself as a Robin Hood figure in poor communities. He donated to churches, funded soccer fields and community centers, and provided direct cash handouts to families struggling to survive. In some villages throughout Sinaloa, people called him El Padrino, the Godfather. He was simultaneously feared and admired, viewed as a violent criminal by authorities, but as a benefactor by people the government had forgotten. This grassroots support network would prove crucial when authorities finally began hunting him seriously. By the early 1990s, the violence was escalating beyond what either government could ignore. The Mexican government, under enormous pressure from the United States, launched a national crackdown on the cartels. The honeymoon period, where traffickers could operate with relative impunity, was coming to an end. In 1993, Chapo's luck temporarily ran out. He was captured in Guatemala and extradited back to Mexico, where he was sent to Punta Grande, supposedly a high-security federal prison designed to hold the country's most dangerous criminals. But even behind bars, Chapo continued to run his cartel empire. Through a combination of bribes and intimidation, he essentially turned Ponte Grande into his personal headquarters. He corrupted guards, hosted parties in his cell, enjoyed conjugal visits with multiple women, and lived like a king while technically serving a prison sentence. What authorities didn't realize was that Chapo was also planning something that would humiliate the entire Mexican justice system and turn him from a notorious criminal into a folk legend. He was planning the most audacious prison escape in modern history. January 19, 2001. It was just another day at Ponte Grande Federal Prison until guards realized that their most valuable prisoner had simply vanished. Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán, the man supposedly locked away in Mexico's most secure facility, was gone. The escape method was almost comically simple, yet required massive corruption to execute. According to investigations, Chapo had bribed virtually everyone: the warden, guards, janitors, kitchen staff. He simply climbed into a laundry cart, was wheeled out of the prison by corrupted guards, and disappeared into the Mexican countryside. For 13 years, El Chapo became Mexico's most wanted fugitive and one of the world's most elusive criminals. He didn't just hide. He continued to expand his empire while staying one step ahead of an international manhunt involving the FBI, Interpol, and Mexican federal forces. During this time, his legend grew to mythical proportions. Forbes magazine listed him as one of the world's most powerful people, and estimated his personal wealth at over $1 billion. Musicians wrote corridos, traditional Mexican ballads, celebrating his exploits. He became a folk hero to some, a terrorist to others. Chapo's hiding places were engineering marvels in themselves. Deep in the Sierra Madre Mountains, he constructed elaborate bunkers with escape tunnels, communication centers, and enough supplies to survive extended sieges. Local residents, benefiting from his generosity, served as an early warning network against approaching authorities. On February 22, 2014, the manhunt finally succeeded. Mexican Marines, acting on intelligence from U.S. agencies, captured Chapo in a beachside condo. The world's most wanted drug lord was taken without a single shot being fired, ending 13 years of freedom. This time, Mexican authorities weren't taking any chances. They sent him to Altiplano, a maximum security prison designed specifically to prevent escapes. 24-hour video surveillance, guards who rotated frequently to prevent corruption, and isolation protocols that limited his contact with the outside world. For over a year, it seemed like the system was finally working. Chapo was locked in a small cell for 23 hours a day, allowed minimal human contact, and monitored constantly. Mexican officials boasted that escape was impossible. They were wrong. While authorities watched Chapo in his cell, his organization was constructing the most sophisticated prison escape tunnel in history. Starting from a house nearly a mile away, engineers dug a tunnel that would make subway contractors jealous. It included ventilation systems, lighting, and even a motorcycle mounted on rails for quick transportation. On July 11, 2015, surveillance cameras captured Chapo, pacing in his cell, then sitting on his bed, then simply disappearing from view. He had dropped through a hole in his shower floor and escaped through the tunnel. By the time guards realized he was gone, Chapo was already miles away. The escape was the most embarrassing moment for Mexican law enforcement in modern history. President Enrique Peña Nieto had personally assured the United States that Chapo would remain imprisoned. The escape dominated international headlines and made Mexico's justice system a global laughingstock. But this time, the manhunt was different. The escape had been too embarrassing, too public. Every resource of the Mexican and American governments was focused on recapturing him. Ironically, it was Chapo's own ego that led to his downfall. His desire to have his story told led to a secret meeting with actor Sean Penn, which provided crucial intelligence to authorities. January 8, 2016. Mexican Marines surrounded a house in Los Mochis, Sinaloa. After a fierce gun battle that left several cartel gunmen dead, they found their prize hiding in a drainpipe like a common criminal. Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán, the escape artist, was finally captured for good. This time, Mexican authorities weren't taking any chances with their prison system. In January 2017, just one day before Donald Trump's inauguration as U.S. President, Chapo was extradited to the United States to face charges in federal court. The trial began in November 2018 in Brooklyn, New York, in a courthouse transformed into a fortress. The prosecution had spent years building an ironclad case, gathering evidence that would provide a stunning window into the inner workings of the world's most powerful drug cartel. The evidence was overwhelming and unprecedented in scope. Wiretapped phone calls where Chapo personally ordered murders, text messages discussing multi-million-dollar drug shipments, testimony from former associates detailing decades of violence and corruption, financial records showing the cartel's massive cash flows, video footage of tunnel operations. The witnesses against him read like a who's who of cartel leadership. Former associates, rivals, and even family members testified about Chapo's role in thousands of murders, massive drug shipments, and systematic corruption. The testimony painted a picture of a man who had personally ordered the deaths of anyone who crossed him. On February 12, 2019, after deliberating for 6 days, the jury reached their verdict. Guilty on all 10 counts, including running a continuing criminal enterprise, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. The man who had once been considered untouchable was now facing life in prison. Chapo was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years and sent to ADX Florence in Colorado, America's most secure prison. Known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. No windows provide views of the outside world. No visitors are allowed. And definitely no tunnels are possible through the reinforced concrete and steel construction. But El Chapo's capture didn't end the story, it just started a new chapter. His sons, known as Los Chapitos, have taken control of significant portions of the Sinaloa Cartel. The violence continues. The drugs continue to flow across borders. And the corrupting influence of narco money continues to poison institutions on both sides of the border. El Chapo wasn't the first major drug lord, and he certainly wasn't the last. But he was the most embarrassing, elusive, and iconic narco king of the 21st century. He showed the world that you don't need armies or elections to rule territory, just tunnels, cash, and an unlimited willingness to use violence. He ruled through a combination of bribes and bullets, generosity and terror. And when the world finally caught him after decades of trying, he had already accomplished something far more dangerous than any individual criminal career. By then, the monster he had created was far bigger than the man himself. El Chapo wasn't just a drug lord. He was a brand, a blueprint for how modern criminal organizations operate, and a ghost that continues to haunt the borderlands long after he was locked away forever. The Tunnel King's reign is over, but the tunnels he built, literal and figurative, remain open for business.
Subscribe for more stories that make you question everything.